Hello, insane children. Welcome once again to Asylum crowd design session. This is session number 8, and we are coming to you from our Discord server, aka Wonderland, which is provided as a perk, I guess, to the $5 tier and above over on our Patreon. And if you are listening along on YouTube, you can join along by heading over to AmericanMcGee.com and clicking on the Asylum Wiki. Today we are going to be talking about gameplay ideas and suggestions from the crowd. And of course, we have our insane children and our mods here who are going to provide some feedback and commentary on these ideas as we go through the list. If you are in the chat here on Discord and you have a microphone and you have something you'd like to share, please do and indicate your desire, and you are having a microphone by using the microphone emoji. I think that is about it. So if you're interested in our Patreon, hit the links in the comments below. And with that, do our mods have anything else they want to say before we get started?
Just hello.
Hello.
I'm trying my best to stay up.
Hello to everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Ahoy hoy, welcome aboard. As people complained about us saying last.
Ahoy, mateys! And welcome ye to yet another seafaring something salty sea dog adventure in game design.
Let's all sing a
Do you want to build a snowman? All right. So let's start at the top of the ideas and suggestions for gameplay. We have something written here. Number 1, Alice explores parts of her memories as a level. So I think this is a bit redundant, as my sense of the Alice games is that in general, what she is exploring is the interior of her mind, her memory, and her psyche. So this could actually be the tagline on the back of the box. I don't know that we need to, I don't know, is there something more we want to do with this?
Well,
It does seem like they've just described the game.
yeah, I was gonna say, also in Madness Returns, didn't we have all the flashbacks of the fire and everything with her unlocking, the different keys quite literally?
Yes, that's correct. So, I mean, I do feel like this sentence, in essence, describes the Alice series. So I think we'd want a bit more detail, or some specificity, right? Like maybe the person who wrote this has, I don't know. It's very general. It's very very broad. It like very much isolates the overall concept of the game. So. Moving along, point 2, rocking horse works as a means of travel. I think we'd probably want some more detail. Does the person think that this is taking us between levels, or this is a thing we ride around like a motorcycle inside of levels?
I think that's what they mean. Just kind of hop on the horse and just freely ride around the level.
Yeah, like a little bit of fast travel within the hub or the world or something.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how I read it.
I think this has, there's something to this point depending on how large we make these areas. And we have talked about having areas of the game that are in essence, they're procedurally generated sections. So let's call them forests or grassy plains or whatever, but they're connecting together the more defined kind of puzzle and combat areas. So we might consider those to be levels that are pre-built, and then the space surrounding those pre-built levels could be something more dynamic or procedural. And in that instance, yeah, we'd want some sort of Wonderland version of a motorcycle or a horse to zoom around.
I like what Truth Decay wrote. He said perhaps like a scripted flying rocking horse, kind of like the cart journeys in AMA.
Yeah, we could do that as a level that's got sort of an on rails section for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing I did. I don't know if it's not in the game ideas or suggestions, but there was a lot of talk about the on rails concepts that went into the last YouTube stream. So I know maybe we'll hold off on that for another day, but since it's fresh in the mind, since we're talking about fast travel and you brought up that on-rail section, maybe go over that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean there's going to be some on-rail sections, and I think we have seen some interesting comment. I mean, there's definitely people who are pushing back against on-rail, and there's people who are big fans of it. We saw that when we referenced QuickTime events and on-rail sequences. I think this, when I think about it though, the rocking horse as a means of travel, it feels more to me like the kind of thing we'd use again to zip around the open areas of Wonderland that we're talking about. So this is more like a Grand Theft Auto style, or a Red Dead Redemption style hop on a horse and move around a larger environment in my mind.
Yep.
Like the Octo Chicken Greg says, this
Zelda.
game's version of the Epona from Zelda.
Right. Exactly. Or, I mean, in the last Zelda, there's horses. I mean, you just find a horse and jump on it and whistle and it comes. And
Oh, Breath of the Wild.
yeah, Breath of the Wild.
Wasn't there sort of like a rocking horse style motorbike in Breath of the Wild?
Oh, there is in
Yes.
the DLC.
That's right.
Oh, is it DLC, right?
Yes.
I just don't know. I mean, in the past, we've never really given Alice, agency over some form of vehicle. I mean, I could imagine. I think if I saw something like that, I would find it difficult to kind of accept in the magical universe that she lives in. But that being said, like for instance, if we gave her a flying carpet, I could imagine that seeing her sort of zip around on a flying carpet would work for me. It would have to be something quite out there. It'd have to be quite magical for it to work for me. So maybe what we should do is have our artists come up with a couple of images that show a rocking horse that she's traveling around on, a flying carpet, and then we can come up with a list of some other things, and that might be interesting.
I like that
That sounds
approach.
decent.
Again, I mean, the big question here comes back to how we're generating, or if we're generating larger areas outside the combat puzzle zones, and if those areas are worth exploring and why they would be. So this all kind of hooks together to a topic that I think we will more than likely come back to and have to detail out before too long.
Yeah.
Taylor asks if the horse can talk, which is a good idea if it was like a character in itself.
Ooh.
Well, I mean, a horse is a horse, of course.
Nice rhyme.
So I mean, for sure, we'll bring Mr. Ed into Wonderland. All right. So moving on to point 3 here, we've got building blocks used for altering or upgrading weapons, and then there's a couple of points under that. Could also be used to create bridges or walls to avoid enemies, a limited number of blocks to avoid players skipping areas, and blocks collapse after a certain amount of time. So yeah, I'm less sure about the idea of using them to alter or upgrade weapons, because that sounds like an entire and probably fairly complex system that then also has to interact with engaging with enemies and whatnot. But I think the idea of building blocks that could be used to build stuff in the world would be fun. Of course, we're going to then run into comparisons to Minecraft. Wonderland, Minecraft? Anybody?
There are probably mods for Minecraft that do that, so. But, I mean, it could be for an area, but it's just also trying to see if...
A bridge made out of toy blocks.
I mean, it'd be one thing, to build something for a one-off, but having where everything is buildable, as we kind of said, it's just Minecraft.
Yeah, and then the problem with making it as one-off to a particular zone or area is that oftentimes, like when we did that sort of thing in Madness Returns, you could feel that it was a one-off implementation because it wasn't very well tuned. There's a lot of issues that resulted in that, but I would want to be careful picking and choosing our one-off things like that. And it feels to me like this as a one-off is going to be I feel like it would be a fairly complicated thing to implement. And as a result, it might get kind of pushed down the list. Would you rather have a really highly functional ability to grow and stomp on enemies, or building blocks? I feel like growing and stomping on enemies is a Alice signature, and building blocks is less so.
That's a good point. Yeah, truth
I
is
still think this is kind of a fun idea, though. I mean, I would love to have a sort of the Wilds of Wonderland survival, building game where Alice is out in the forest collecting mushrooms and.
As long as it isn't Battle Royale. All right.
Yeah, I think that's been done.
She's already dabbing. You can do flossing as well.
Oh
boy. Right. So I think on this concept, it's an interesting one, but it's probably going to get pushed down the list a bit, and we may come back to it later on when we start to maybe explore some of the puzzle areas. We may maybe do some sort of limited implementation of this, because we did have building blocks in the Dollhouse zone of Madness Returns. I mean, they're an easy asset. The concept of working with them, of pushing and pulling, things like that, is not too far out there. Any other thoughts or suggestions on building blocks?
Well, I do just like the general concept that Truth Decay came up with, and just his overview on suggestions on one-off versus full gameplay, and that gameplay's been pretty well defined. Don't know if you want anything else to say about it.
Yeah, I think that the point he's making there is correct, and the gameplay of Alice is pretty well defined. He's saying that he sees most of these ideas as being one-offs, as opposed to that's true. I think that there are some of these that are one-offs, but like if you skip down to say 5 or 6, those are both game-wide concepts. One is that you'd gather materials and make dresses. Another is that a pocket watch that does something, and I'm assuming that would work throughout the entire game. Same goes for 0.7. They're one-offs in some cases, depending on if we decided to put them into one area only. But even this building blocks thing, you could imagine, could be a full-blown item that we implement that allows her throughout the game to use building blocks to block enemies or to build bridges or things like that. I mean, this could become a massive and signature portion of the game itself. So I guess the question is just, do we feel like building blocks, let's say that we approached it as a massive, fully integrated portion of this new game. It became almost like her Indiana Jones whip, a signature that, as she goes around in Asylum, she can use building blocks to encase enemies or to span distances with bridges. Okay, is that where we want to go? Does building blocks feel like it's that kind of idea that we realize across an entire product?
I thought of just seeing it like just perhaps things made out of toy blocks, like in the world, not necessarily making them. They're just kind of like already there, like aesthetics.
Right. I mean, it just, for me, it doesn't feel like it fits thematically. Right. I don't recall there ever being mention of blocks in the Alice books, for instance.
No, actually, I think you're correct in that.
Right. So it feels to me like this is a suggestion for a one-off thing, or just, a sort of limited application within a particular area. And again, that's fine. And again, I'd say we can keep it somewhere on a list. You're going to push it down the list a little ways, and we may come back to it as sort of a push-pull puzzle or something else that she does in a particular area. Keeping in mind, and maybe this is worth restating, what we are envisioning is these concrete areas that contain the combat and the puzzle solving, and then those areas are surrounded by more exploratory collection type zones. So, I mean, there's quite a few games out there like that. Certainly, the most recent Zelda would actually fit into that category, and so I kind of envision that we're gonna go in a similar direction to that with this new Alice. I think God of War even did that to some. The recent God of War did that to some degree. You know, there were very distinct combat arenas, and then the areas between those arenas were more about exploration.
Hmm.
Though that wasn't quite as open worldy as I think we're thinking about in having a hub in the new Alice game. Anyway, this kind of building blocks concept could be the thing that defines one of the particular areas, but then doesn't really go outside of that. And it would match thematically, like let's say we had a zone where it was very much, again, similar to the dollhouse theme, and now there's building blocks there. That makes sense. And then there's a particular puzzle in there. So I think it's a fine idea. We just come back to it.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Okay. All right. Moving on to the next point. We have Alice can find blank chalkboards to draw on, which would materialize what she. Okay, so Alice can find. Sorry, I'm just laughing at the implementation of this. So Alice can find blank chalkboards to draw on, which would materialize what she draws. This would consume the slate, so it's like a one use, and this could be used for the patches and symbols. Okay. Yeah, I'd be very curious to know how we implement this, say, using a dual shot, a dual stick controller.
Got the
and
touchpad.
drawing.
That's
Right.
Well, not every system's
Well,
gonna
on the
have that.
PS4, yeah, that's true. Forget the others.
There was a game though on, what was the game on? Was it a mobile game? I thought it was a Nintendo game where you actually drew
Drawn to Life?
little something like that, and they actually had a bit of an interpreter for the things that you drew and
Or Scribblenauts?
Scribblenauts.
I was thinking Scribblenauts, but that's a
That
I was
you
thinking that.
that was
You
you
actually
right.
type what you want.
Yeah.
You type it, you don't draw it.
Yeah, you type it.
Oh right. Why isn't it called Typernauts?
It's a good question.
I'm gonna have to go give that a 1-star review now. So, I think, the moment I read this, the first thing that pops up in my mind is just the difficulty of implementing the drawing system in a way that doesn't create massive frustration. And then the suggestion for use here is that you would materialize whatever is drawn. And so the suggestion is made it could be a use for the patches and symbols. I guess my question would be, if this is about materializing what she draws, then if I were given the opportunity, I'd rather just have a random, let's say we put it in the shape of a jack-in-the-box, and when you pick up that jack-in-the-box, there's either a random item generator contained within, or somehow you get to press A, B, or C in order to tell it, I want item A, B, or C to come out of this. I'd rather not have the additional friction of having to draw something.
Well, what about instead of having you draw something and instead of having it random, what about having parts that you put together? So, for example, kind of like not to say a slot machine, but it's like, here's 5 pieces. You put them in a certain order.
That's called a puzzle.
quote-unquote drawing. Not a puzzle, but
Well, I mean,
but there's no correct answer. Yeah, there's no
But it's
correct
also
answer.
called. But it's also called crafting. It's also called cooking. With a recipe. I mean, it's called spell creation. It's called a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So in order for that to be viewed as not being a very shallow implementation, you now need to come up with an entire materials system. You have to come up with a proper crafting system that it has to kind of level up with the player and the game. It has to be balanced. You're going into RPG territory there. So is that really where we want to go?
I'm not sure.
Yeah. Look, I love crafting, and I find, recipe, grabbing the elements required for recipes and putting things together to be a great part of certain kinds of games, but those generally they tend to be the types of games where you have large portions to kind of slow down and look at your inventory. And I think we kind of feel like Alice is one of those games where you're moving fast through the world at most times. It doesn't seem like, I don't recall in the past really spending a lot of time in the menus of
No.
the Alice games. What's the thought on this?
I think again the point of we want to stay out of menus is
Right.
the one thing. Unless we're in the hub world of things where you said just we want to. I just like fighting, collecting, and things like that. That Wendy J just said, where we're not focused on. All right, Is this character set up correctly? Do I have the armor slot? Am I getting my +3 properly? Am I ready for this? We want something that.
Correct. And I think Wendy J, I'm not going to say Ja or Ja. Wendy J has it right. It's fighting, collecting, exploring. And, I personally, I want that kind of faster pace in this game. It's not to say that every game has to, be that way. But yeah, minimum menus, as Taylor says. Okay, why don't we set this aside for now and move on? I think it's got too many bits of complication within it. Point 5 is Alice gathers pieces of materials that become her dresses. This is going to reopen that whole can of worms with regards to selecting, and we've finished that as far as I know. So let's just move on.
Next, please.
Next. Okay. Hey, mateys. Okay, so number 6, a pocket watch that can revert a small amount of time. For example, you take too much damage, go back and try again. So I really like the pocket watch idea. I really liked the idea that we had done with the White Rabbit, the clock bomb last time around. And I like messing with time. So I do think that we want to maybe think about a way to implement something along these lines.
You guys ever played Prince of Persia?
Yep.
And that'd be it. That's how I see it anyways.
See, I don't know why it's not based on the time of this, but every time I think of a way that implementing time worked really well was Dishonored 2 with having the ability to see the past, interact with it, and moving between the two, but that's not something that would work for this game. It's just whenever I think about it. Sorry, I know off topic, but...
No, it's fine. Well, so something to think about, like with Persia and Sands of Time, you have to remember that for one thing, they really struggled with implementing that. And you really have to keep everything in a kind of linear sandbox, so you've got absolute control over all the events that are taking place so that you can rewind stuff. When we're talking about more open levels, it's going to be, it gets exponentially more difficult to rewind the events that have taken place, which is why, for instance, if you look at a lot of games that implement time, either freezing or rewinding, they do it inside of very small enclosures, right? They do it in these little small areas. So that was always my idea, was that like for really meaningful time manipulation, we would just keep it encapsulated within particular rooms or levels where we've got a lot of control over it. I don't, for the game-wide stuff, obviously stopping time or slowing time, so long as time always continues to progress in the forward direction, that is totally doable. So it's when you start trying to rewind stuff that it gets really difficult on a larger scale.
Well, I see.
We did have
I'm sorry.
I was going to say we had that in the concept, didn't we? Some of the earliest concepts we had, the slowing and stopping to get past stuff.
I see that the Octo Chicken, Greg, and other people are talking about Bayonetta's Witch Time, which I think we talked about before, which is really an interesting way to deal with time, where you use a dodge mechanic that slows down everything else, and people seem to be agreeing with that. In the chat, where it gives we had the butterfly dodge, if I'm not mistaken, and Madness Returns, so
And that did create, well, that didn't create a slowdown in time. Alice really fast.
No, but yeah, but sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean, it's a fine example. But I think the idea would be maybe the butterfly dodge like that in the game does in fact slow down time in addition to, you know, making her move quickly.
That's
And
the thing.
That
Yeah.
does seem to be a popular mechanic these days, doesn't it? I mean, you can
Yes.
dodge, but if you do a perfect dodge, you get a little buff of some description.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
Okay.
that's what Octo Greg is saying. I think we all kind of like that. It gives players reason to dodge and gives a fluid motion too.
So let's, you know, put that in, kind of hard pencil that in. We all like that idea very much. As far as on the dodge and also trying to explore and find other slow down or stop time mechanics. I would really like to bring something like the clockwork, the rabbit bomb back. And I liked him not only because he was a bomb and he stopped time, but also he was a weight that you could set onto a, you know, a button and hold something down. So I think it'd be great if we could continue that. In fact, what we had talked about, I think before, was that she could be using the White Rabbit, the plush, for that function. Although obviously it would be not very nice to see him explode into bits and pieces. But maybe he does. I don't know. It'd be kind of something to play with.
No, but again, I think the whole Clockwork Rabbit versus stopwatch are two different concepts because that's more of a gameplay of puzzle aspect as well. Because that was really interesting how it worked with, you could use it for puzzle, you can use it for dealing with enemies. So that's kind of how I look at it with that, beyond just the time freezing.
I mean, I've said before, I like those kinds of overloaded items when it makes sense that all the overloading kind of fits together and that those bits don't necessarily interfere with one another. So anyway, all right. So two pieces that should come out of this. This is making mention of a pocket watch, but I think what we want to do is, I do think we should write down that the tech team should explore time reversal. So let's write that down. Yes, we want time reversal. I don't know what form it comes in. It could be a pocket watch pickup that you trigger. And then we should also write down that we want the time manipulation in her butterfly dodge. And we should write down that we want the clock bomb rabbit to come back in some form. And maybe it's the White Rabbit plush. Maybe he can slow time. Maybe he doesn't explode. But yeah. Anything else that we want to add on that topic? It's a pretty big one. I mean, that's the whole time topic, and that whole conversation. It's a good one to have early because it's going to absolutely define a lot of the technical structure of the game at a very, very early stage. Because if they don't start building the game with all that stuff in mind from day one, it just gets more and more difficult to do as the development progresses.
Well, we better take our time. With that. I got to. I'll be here all week. Tip the fish. Enjoy the waitress.
Lame.
Hey. Alright, matey. Time to walk the plank. Alrighty. So we're going to move on now to point 7, and that is that Alice has catchphrases. Example, welcome to the club. Death suits you.
She has one.
First
Get
rule
bent,
of Fight
go.
Club.
You broke it. You broke it.
Jib it up.
Jib it up. I think we should just have a button dedicated to jib it up. That's just you just can press that at any time. Okay.
Definitely have to have get bent governor in.
You want to fight me?
So Taylor is asking, should we make a page around time mechanics? Yes,
A
I
whole
think
new
that would be a very
page.
good idea.
Yeah.
And that sounds like a good name for a cyberpunk, not a cyberpunk, a steampunk novel, The Time Mechanics. A bunch of
Well, there was the Time Bandits.
that was Time Bandits, yeah. Okay, so yes, let's have a page about time mechanics. And let's not have Alice having catchphrases like this. This
But
doesn't
can she
really work.
dab still?
Ah,
Yeah. I do think we want something. I mean, catchphrases, I think, is not necessarily the right phrase for what we're looking for here. But remember, we have talked about having her whistle or hum or sing nervously and talk to the rabbit. Because this, in this game, I think more so than in the past, she has an opportunity to talk to herself, to talk to the rabbit. So I think that we should set aside space for discussing that, though.
Yeah, definitely. And again, for catchphrases, you have the Cheshire Cat, who has the
quotes.
catch.
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
known
I
for the
think-
quotes.
Exactly. I think we keep him. Leave that job to him.
Yeah.
Moving on to point 8. Someone says Alice zombie mode.
What?
I have no idea.
Okay. Does anybody
Okay,
have?
someone look at like hysteria. So, I think people are talking about COD style, Call of Duty zombie.
Like just waves of enemies? Didn't we talk about that? Like you wanted like a coliseum where you just fight until you die, pretty much.
I would really love it if we get closer to waves of enemies. One of the issues with using, very high polygon enemy models with lots of animations and lots of particle effects, and compared to back in the day when everything was a sprite, you could instance, hundreds of sprites, and it took up very little of your processor's time to have this stuff thought about and displayed on screen. But nowadays, if you put one complicated enemy on screen, like it can generate a noticeable hit. So I think there are opportunities, though, these days. A lot of the engines, modern engines, are now implementing kind of Horde technology, and I think there are plenty of places where it'd be great to have Alice go into some zones and mow down big hordes of enemies. So fine with me if that's what this means.
I think that's what it means.
Yeah, I mean, again, personally, I find it can be really gratifying to go into places where you've got tons and tons of enemies and you're very overpowered and you can just kind of mow the grass,
Yeah.
as opposed to going into something that feels like a little zone and just fighting the same guy for 2 minutes until you get the correct sequence down.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so moving on, point 9. Someone has written that there'd be a side quest in the Hatter's domain, collect pieces for a clock, and there'd be 2 different outcomes. One is give Hatter the pieces and receive a chemical compound that can melt walls. Ooh, that's complicated. As a reward. 2, keep the pieces and use them to upgrade Alice or her items. Okay. So this is really kind of a story story mission suggestion as a side quest. I don't think that it's a bad idea to have suggestions for quests like this. I think one of the issues, the first suggestion here, that's the result of the side quest, is that it would allow. Martin, you doing okay there? You having some sort of cardiac breathing
the
issue?
microphone on my t-shirt. Sorry.
So the suggestion here is that the Hatter would give her something that would melt walls. That's super complicated. The moment that you're able to just melt your way around the game, it destroys all of the design that we put into it. But
It would also be like, do you need to melt walls to get to certain areas? And if you do, then how can you have a choice to not do that? It's probably more complicated than it sounds.
It does a little bit.
Well, I mean, this is why if you play the Portal game, in Portal you essentially have the power to melt walls, right? But then what they have to do in Portal is they have to be very specific about the design of their levels and having materials that you can portal into and materials that you cannot portal into. And so you have to build a very limited environment, which is exactly what they did. They built an underground laboratory to contain that gameplay concept. It would be very difficult to make something like that work in a full-blown real world or fantasy world environment.
I think Taylor has the point exactly, is whether or not choices change the outcome significantly. Did you take choice A or choice B? Did you take the bird or the cage?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fine. This suggestion here has one outcome is you give those pieces to the Hatter, and the other outcome you keep the pieces and you upgrade Alice's item. It's fine. It again means that from a very early stage, which we are fortunately in, as we write the narrative, we would put those branches in there. And this type of suggestion, aside from the melting walls idea, isn't difficult to implement. It just would require that in one instance, Hatter is disappointed that you wasted his clock pieces on an upgrade to your items, versus Hatter rewarding you with something that hopefully isn't melting walls for accomplishing the mission. So that's fine. And I think I saw somebody here asking, the other question being, are there going to be side quests in this game? And that's the Octo Chicken asking that question. And I think that the answer to that question, Octo Chicken, is yes. I believe that we are going to create space for side quests, because we are talking about a hub, and that hub then suggests that there's areas you're able to revisit, and then within those areas, I believe that there's going to be multiple opportunities to engage with and complete tasks. All right, Vegas, thanks.
Oh, great.
Taylor
My
also
waterfall is
wrote,
back.
it's back, all right. That the choices, they wouldn't have huge consequences, but just different rewards at the end of the quest.
Well, I mean, this is one of those big conundrums that you get into. Start a game in which you can have big consequences, is that if we come out the gate and say, hey, our new Alice game is going to allow you to make choices that have big consequences, at the end of the day, unless the consequences are genuinely big, you will invariably get reviewers who say, that didn't do anything. I ran around murdering all of these characters and being a total jerk, and I basically got the same ending to the game as if I didn't go around murdering everybody and being a jerk, right? So, when you start talking about choices and consequences, you're basically talking about building multiple games, because each of the paths has to be fully realized. Well, now you've just doubled the requirement for work to see that vision through.
Yeah, we just brought up Taylor Infinite. I mean, if you look at it,
Yeah.
there's great games like BioShock, and there's not good games like BioShock Infinite.
Yeah. Yeah.
That gave you the choice.
Right.
So would you kindly make a good game? I mean,
so I want us to be really careful around saying that these types of different path choices could dramatically affect the outcome of the game. It's not going to happen. The end of this game has to be a very specific event, which then leads into all the other games. So there can't be anything unknown or nebulous about, hey, where is this going? If I spend all my time being a jerk, can I shift the outcome at the end of this game? No, you can't. Okay, so moving on to Hatter's Workshop acts as an area to upgrade weapons and clothing. Did we not say that was going to be something that was going on in the hub?
Yeah, I thought we talked about that in the hub, and maybe having the doll maker, because we don't know who he is yet, as the person to get them.
Mm-hmm.
I like that idea a lot.
Or that, yeah, the sheep in a toy shop was an idea.
Okay, so I really like that idea. I like it being in. I like and I dislike it being the doll maker. I say let's go for it though, because I think the nod to the people who understand who the doll maker is, and of course seeing him in an early version. I mean, can you imagine the doll maker as this representation in Alice's mind, being in the train station and vocally expressing his fascination with and love of trains, and yet it's going to take 2 more games before we see what he's saying realized in the horror of the infernal train. So the guy that we meet at this stage is, kind of like a Geppetto, building his toys and upgrading your weapons. And he seems like a nice enough guy, but something in the lines that we write for him points to this is all going to go very wrong. I know where this is going,
It just reminds me too. I just spoilers for those that don't play Dead Cells, but they just released a DLC, and the collector who you've been helping with the entire time ends up being the final boss because you've been giving him all this
Spoilers.
ability. I said spoilers.
Thanks
so
for that.
But yeah, so it's taking this person you didn't think was going to do anything, and then oops, okay.
Yeah.
So and then
So let's take point 10 and let's write down that alongside the work that's being done on the illustration, the visualization of the train station, which I know we have Joey working on that, and we have Sunny is working on that, and I think Omri's doing something on that as well. Let's have also the suggestion that they work on some of the locations, and that right now for sure we're going to see. So I've asked them to do the mock turtle, to show the mock turtle as sort of the train station master, whatever that's called. Is that a conductor? I don't know.
I know there's a term,
I
but
think that's it.
no, conductor runs the train. I don't think the conductor is.
Yeah, so whatever the station master is, or whatever for a train
that.
station. I don't think that's the term, but I just made that up. But then the other thing would be the doll maker's shop, which we do have as the upgrade location for weapons and clothing. And so I think it'd be great to see some visualizations of that, and make sure we've got that hint of foreshadowing, that sort of that edge of creepiness that shit, I know who this guy is going to become. And of course there's nothing you can do about it, but there he is. All right.
I'm reading. Everyone's liking Greg's idea, just like having him as a kindly doctor guy. He loves children, big fan of trains, and making toys for kids, but without the oozing ruin.
Yeah, I mean, he loves children. He wants to make sure Alice looks pretty, and grows up to be a great, strong woman.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, the amount of fun and evil foreshadowing that we can do with his character. Again, make him up to look really warm, and the shop is really inviting, but you can imagine that going into that scene, and it's like a kid going into a Christmas toy shop, and you just feel like, wow, what have I stumbled onto here? This is amazing. And then he comes around the corner and you go, uh-oh, something's I know this guy. This isn't right. But maybe it's like a subconscious thing, and then slowly but surely we just continue to hammer home who this guy is, and then somewhere, I don't know, maybe Alice burns his shop down or something.
This seems familiar.
Accidentally burns his shop down. Yeah. Okay. Anything else on this point, on point 10?
I think we're good.
Okay. So we are now at point 11, Alice in a sky cloud area. Okay. We did that in Madness Returns with the card bridge sequence, and I was always a really big fan of that. And I don't know if it's been made clear enough, but if you look at some of the early concept artwork for Asylum, there are these scenes of the blown up chunks of Wonderland floating in the sky. And I very much want for that to be the way that we realize this game, this world, the Wonderland this time around, is big, huge sections of Wonderland that have been blown to chunks. You actually kind of got a sense for that at the start of Madness Returns, where she falls down into Wonderland, and off to one side is just open blue sky, and then you move into the world. Actually, throughout that first level of Madness Returns, you kind of get a sense of the blown-up nature of Wonderland. So I want us to even more sort of reinforce that in Asylum, and that could be the place also where we come up with the as the previous comment on the rocking horse, maybe the vehicle she needs is the vehicle she uses to fly between those zones. So that again goes back to like a flying carpet type of thing or a flying horse type of thing. Any thoughts or comments on that?
It's beginning to sound a lot like a semi-open world type of game, which I'm like really into the idea. So I'm liking everything you threw out there.
Well, it's an open world game where a lot of the openness is just sky. So that means that these islands can help to constrain the design challenges that come with properly truly open worlds, right? Because you always run up to a border, but then there may be some of these islands that in and of themselves are very open in the sense that there's not a lot of structures on them. It's just a bunch of forest and waterfalls and stuff like that. So
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of what level, if there's a level in particular that we have that would work well for that. From denial, anger, bargaining, the different stages, or if it's just a general between worlds thing.
state that again.
I'm sorry, I'm just looking at different levels, as in the levels designed already, if there's one that would work best for having like a flying area or not. That was just kind of what I've been looking through.
Ah, I see. Well, I mean, in my view, every one of the things that is defined as an area is in and of itself a chunk, an island floating in this little solar system.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's
I
what
mean,
I
they
thought,
all, yeah. So they would all have the opportunity to present Alice with some sky travel, some cloud type stuff, So Octo Chicken Greg says, a random thought. If the hub is the looking glass line, perhaps it could be destroyed in the ending of the game, and from the wreckage of the hub, the doll maker could start making his infernal train. Well, Octo Chicken, that is exactly how it goes. In fact, because if you think about at the big in Madness Returns, the hub is in essence where the infernal train was built. The infernal train was built by the Hatter, where better to have that being built than the thing that looks like this big gothic crazy train station. So I think what we'll try to do is probably suggest that the thing that is the train station in this game maybe has some relationship, proximity to, or maybe is one and the same as the place where the Hatter built the train. Then again, it may be maybe in another area. We'll have to kind of map that out and see. But I like that idea a lot, though. Lucas says Wonderland is its own solar system now. Well, in fact, it is. If you go and you look at the early artwork that Joey did, she did map out Wonderland, and it was specifically mapped out as a solar system. So the chaos, the sun, sits at the center of it, and then all of the story, the levels, the characters all orbit around that centerpiece. So we do have images that basically paint that picture and paint it as a solar system. And I mean, each of these areas is aligned with a planet. It's aligned with an alchemical symbol that's aligned with an element. And so there is very much intentional mirroring of the idea of a solar system in Wonderland. Okay, so what else have we got here? Point 12, someone suggests different modes beyond the usual difficulty modes. A reverse mode where you play the game backwards and the controls are backwards. An inverted mode where the game is played upside down. A frenemy mode where all of your allies are now enemies. So I think that these are quite interesting, and I think if you were, say, playing a game of Dungeons and Dragons, right? You're playing a role-playing game, or you were doing any other kind of game where, we were sat around as a tabletop game, and we were. I think we could make something like that work. My concern with a lot of these would be the systems involved in, a console game. Trying to reverse those is going to be very, very difficult. Again, it comes back to the point of from the beginning having to design systems and invest to make something like this work. And unless it's a really big core feature of the game, you have to question whether or not the investment is is worthwhile. But I really like the concepts in here, and I do think that having a discussion where we explore modes, maybe not about difficulty, but just modes, could be very worthwhile and fun.
Mm.
Yeah.
Have you thought? I don't know if it's in here actually, just like a photo mode, like others have been putting in games.
What is that?
The
Oh.
photo mode gets rid of the UI, and it allows you to take pictures that look nice compared to
Yeah.
Okay, that's a
all
great
the
one.
games have it.
yeah, most games now are coming with it because people want to post those shots in the Instagrams
Yep.
with their dabbing.
I think it's fantastic that we have that, and if we could think of any other ones, I mean, there are people out there who are going to want to play basically like a super. So here, I've noticed that this is a very sort of active political culture conversation going on in the games space right now, and that is, so and so used a cheat code in order to defeat what's the ninja, what the die wants.
Sekiro's,
Yeah, Sekiro. Yeah, so people were getting really angry that like some reporter used a cheat mode to finish that game and felt good about it. And then of course there are all these tweets that were basically like, "You did nothing, you learned nothing, you failed." Um, I think that those people could probably get bent, because my sense is if I buy a product and I want to use it in a certain way, so as long as I've kind of mostly consumed it the way the creator wanted, and in that case, like, okay, this creator really wants to beat me over the head with this, but I don't really want to get beat over the head, so I'd like to just finish this. Just let the guy finish it, right? And I think the same could be said of there's a lot of people I've heard talk about, the Alice games where they love the art, they love the story, but I couldn't finish it. It was too difficult for me. And I hate to hear that. I want people to be able to finish the games. So, maybe having a mode where the game holds your hand a bit and helps you finish it would be all right.
I completely agree with having a easy, medium, hard, whatever difficulty mode that makes things for accessibility. You want your story to be told.
So like
know?
a nightmare mode, hard mode, medium, and Dean Takahashi mode.
Well, I think Shadow Warrior did it best, where it's like easy mode. It's not because you're weak; it's because you just want to enjoy playing a game. You want to feel like a badass, maybe. Or there are difficulty modes that allow easier dodging. I forget which games, but I know that gives it so people who might not have the dexterity or coordination can play the game easier. So there's reasons to have modes that are
I
accessible.
agree with those. Look, by the way, the Dean dig is a joke. I'm friends with Dean, and he would find that fun. But when I see that kind of thing where people are dogpiling on someone like Dean, or they're dogpiling on someone for not finishing the game the way they think the game should be finished if you're a real gamer, I find all that to be completely ridiculous. So I'm more than happy that we implement, like you said, make the dodge easier, make the damage less, make whatever. Just let people have fun.
That's how it can be described in a lot of the difficulty settings I'm noticing in games these days. They actually
Right.
say for the easiest setting is described as people who want to enjoy the story.
Yeah, exactly. And I would also argue that we should super nightmare rape you in your side as well. I don't have a problem with that either. Okay. Yeah, somebody says here, Wendy says, I've been stuck on the Leaf part of AMA for like 2 months. Yeah, join the club. I don't know if I ever finished that part of the game. I think I had to cheat too.
You finished it.
We have a record of it somewhere, but yeah.
That's a joke. Okay. So on the question of difficulty, someone has mentioned here in point 13, which is funny because we're going to end on this point, and I think we ended on point 13.
We have ended on
as well.
13 so many times, I swear. I kid you not. I
that
could be
might
wrong,
be-
but this feels like it.
That might be by design. I might be just that good at getting to point 13. So the point 13 here says, enemies get stronger the longer a battle takes. Too long and the game will enter insanity mode, where enemies take no damage and everything is covered in blood. This could be a gladiator minigame. Does anybody see any problems with this suggestion that
Enemies
enemies
taking
take
no
no
damage.
damage?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally want my enemies to just curb stomp me after I can't fight them long enough.
Non-stop bullet
Right.
sponge, pretty much.
But yeah, I mean, this could mark us out as the most difficult game ever. Like we spend $20 million making it, and in the first level, you took a little too long to defeat that little card
Squid.
guard
Yeah.
squid, and suddenly he takes no damage. That's it. Game over.
Get good, governor.
Okay. Right. This must be. I think this must be. We've got one of the developers from the this Sakura whatever game has snuck into our forums here. All right.
From Software guys, isn't it?
Yeah, From Software.
Get out of here, From Software. We know what you're trying to do.
Alice Souls. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So this is logically non-functional. That's fine. Well, that brings us to the end of today's session, and that brings us to number 13, where we like to end these. Does anybody have any wrap-up comments? I know that we had, was it Seafoam was trying to share an image.
Oh, he drew a dress. Yeah.
All right. Do we want to have a look at that image really quickly? There we go. Okay, so Seafoam has drawn a chaos dress image, and it's featuring, just in time for Easter, a chaos symbol crown of thorns. That's pretty good. So I guess that means that she's going to resurrect after spending 3 days in a cave where the enemies take no damage
Yeah.
and everything is covered in blood.
She comes back as a chocolate egg.
Yeah, she comes back with a rabbit and
Cool. Well, Seafoam, thank you for sharing that. That's pretty cool. I do like the chaos halo that she's got on there. Pretty messed up. And I do also appreciate everybody's participation and contributions to the creativity that's going into Asylum. These design sessions are always a lot of fun. I think everybody always looks forward to them. We will share this, and you're probably watching this over on YouTube. If you do want to join in future crowd design sessions, then do consider becoming a patron. Links to the Patreon page are down in the description below. Links to the wiki where we followed along in the design suggestions is also down below. That wiki is open, I believe, to public comments. And if you do join us on Patreon, you can also use the Discord to make suggestions for items to add to the wiki. This is meant to be an open process that involves all the fans of the Alice series. So do consider joining us. Unless anybody else has got anything to add.
nope.
Hope
Thank
there's
you
lots of
guys as
dabbing.
always. Just lots of
There's
dabbing.
lots of
Everyone-
dabbing.
Make sure you
Dabs
like,
and chips.
subscribe. Yeah, like, subscribe, dab this video to.
And next time we're going to do the entire in pirate speak and with singing and as a music. That's for some of our friends over on YouTube who seem to really like pirate speak and singing. So do join us for that next week. All right, everybody. Have a good day. Jib it up. And we'll talk to you later.
Bye,
Thanks
everyone.
for joining us. See you later.
Bye-bye.